من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بویم. در دشت مکان دارم، هم فطرت هایم. من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بویم. در دشت مکان دارم، هم فطرت هایم. خوابم نم باران است، فارغ ز لب جویم. تنگ است محیط آنجا، در باغ نمی رویم. من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بویم. در دشت مکان دارم، هم فطرت هایم. از خون رگ خویش است، گر رنگ بر رخ دارم. مشاطه نمیخواهم، زیبایی رخسارم. بر ساقه خود ثابت، فارغ ز مددگارم. نی در طلب یارم، نی در غم اغیارم. من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بویم. در دشت مکان دارم، هم فطرت هایم. جوش می و مستی بین، در چهره گلگونم. داغ است نشان عشق، در سینه پرخونم. آزاده و سرمستم، خو کرده بهامونم. رانده است جنون عشق، از شر به افسونم. من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بویم. در دشت مکان
भाग है मेरे खुले, नूर के जाम मिले। पाप है सारे धुले मौला। भाग है मेरे खुले, नूर के जाम मिले। पाप है सारे धुले मौला। दिल में जोत जली, तेरी नजरें जो मिली। जैसे सूखे शजर पे हो पहली सी बहार। दिल में जोत जली, तेरी नजरें जो मिली। जैसे सूखे शजर पे हो पहली सी बहार। मौला शुक्रिया तेरा, शुक्रिया लाखों शुक्रिया तेरा, शुक्रिया मौला, शुक्रिया तेरा, शुक्रिया
अव्वल है बरकत तेरे आने से मौला। आई है बहार खुशियां बेशुमार तेरे आने से मौला। मौला शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया लाखों शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया। मौला शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया लाखों शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया।
जिंदगी पुरुमीद पुरसुकून हर मरी बरकतें है तेरी मौला।
मुश्किलें हैं टली नई दिशाएं खुली करामतें हैं तेरी मौला। मौला शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया लाखों शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया।
मौला शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया लाखों शुक्रिया तेरा। रहमतें राहतें इनायतें मौला। करामतें हिदायतें नवाज़िशें मौला। अनमोल है वो मेरे बीते पल गुजरे जो तेरे संग। मौला शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया
लाखों शुक्रिया
तेरा शुक्रिया। मौला शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया लाखों शुक्रिया तेरा शुक्रिया। मुस्तफ़ा मुस्तफ़ा जान रहमत मुस्तफ़ा नाम पे जिनकी लाजिम है सल्ले अला। मुस्तफ़ा मुस्तफ़ा जान रहमत मुस्तफ़ा नाम पे जिनकी लाजिम है सल्ले अला। सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम। लफ्ज़ ही ना बन सके जिनमें मुमकिन हो उनका बयान। कैसे करे कोई हमसरी वो मज़हर है नूरे खुदा। सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम।
शफ़क़तें उनकी रुकती कहाँ, किया दरगुज़र हर जिब्र को और हरीफों को भी दी दुआ। सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, 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 सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम।
I am left in the Yumgan, amidst the mountains, not out of helplessness, nor out of desperation. In the middle of the 11th century, the Persian poet, philosopher and Ismaili Muslim Dai, Nasir Khusro, sought refuge in what he called this narrow valley of mountains and piles of dust. Nasir Khusro spoke of a faith deep in people's hearts, a faith whose glorious heritage of learning, of science, of art and of architecture was reflected in the magnificent cities of Samarkand, Bukhara and Khiva. Over the centuries, a succession of empires culminated in Russian dominance across Central Asia's steppes and mountains. The Russian Revolution of 1917 brought forth an ideology that smothered all visible sign of the faith of which Nasir Khusro taught, or so it seemed. In the twilight years of the 20th century, as the huge landmass that made up the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics fragmented itself into independent nations, the peoples of Central Asia, who included the inheritors of the tradition of faith and intellect left behind by Nasir Khusro, found themselves in the midst of dramatic and disruptive changes. For the people of Tajikistan, the independent republic which emerged at this extremity of the former Soviet Union, the civil strife which followed a painful political and economic transition was made worse by the problems of geographic isolation. What resulted, especially for the population of the country's remote hinterland of Badakhshan, was a serious humanitarian crisis which began in the winter of 1992. Fortunately, however, an emergency relief effort ensured the survival of many and began a process of positive change for the newly emerging nation. Food, fuel, and other essentials traveled down a lifeline from Osh in the Kyrgyz Republic across Tajikistan's northeastern frontier. The spring of 1995 thus brought renewed hope for the beleaguered people of the region, not just because the relief effort was being supplemented by a long-term development program, but also because, for the inheritors of the tradition of Nasir Khusro, the Ismaili Muslim Jamaat of Central Asia, it would bring the first formal encounter in their recorded history with their Imam-e-Zaman. Whilst Hazrat Imam continued his official and institutional engagements, the Jamaat proceeded with preparations for their historic mulaqat. Murids walked mile upon mile, across mountains, throughout the night, in rain and icy cold, spending the remaining hours huddled together under blankets and rugs. As the morning mist rose and hours turned to minutes, the assembled Jamaat at Porshniev, on the outskirts of Khorog, sat with the patience of 1,000 years since Nasir Khusro first set foot in Badakhshan, awaiting their Imam in contemplative anticipation. Wisdom accompanied wonderment, as Khalifas, the Jamaat's religious functionaries, together with the seniormost among them, the Shah Kalan, waited to receive Maulana Hazrat Imam. Here, as in Ish Kashim a few days later, Maulana Hazrat Imam's Irshad was heard by members of the Jamaat gathered together across a narrow stretch of river on the northern border of Afghanistan.
My beloved spiritual children and my brothers and sisters in Islam, today is a day of special happiness for me, as this is not only my first visit to Badakhshan, but it is also the first time in many centuries that the Imam of the time of the Ismaili Muslims has had the opportunity to see and to be in the presence of members of the Ismaili Jamaat in Badakhshan and amongst other brothers and sisters Muslims. Let me repeat that this is a day of very special happiness.
Ya Ali Madad, welcome and marhaban. Welcome to Friday Night's Reflections. I'm Arlena Izuki, and I'd like to extend a special welcome to all of our Jamaati members, multi-faith family members, and everyone tuning in from across the country and around the world. I hope you had a wonderful week and enjoyed last week's episode on emergency preparedness. To be honest, I had an amazing week. Here in Edmonton, summer has finally arrived, and I had the time to spend some times in the outdoors with my family and really soaking the sun in as much as possible. And of course, we are seeing an easing of restrictions here in Edmonton related to COVID-19, but also we're seeing the same easing of restrictions across the country, while we all continue to exercise responsibility to ensure that we do not see another spike in COVID infections. Inshallah, we will be able to breathe more easily, literally and figuratively, in the not too distant future. I hope that our brothers and sisters around the world will increasingly be able to say the same in the coming months. Although the pace of vaccinations in many parts of the world continues to be much slower than we would hope. We know that here in Canada, we have been very fortunate to see Jamaat Khanas begin to open in some provinces, with the prospects of others opening up over the coming weeks if the situation continues to improve. And really, that is what tonight's show is about, the opportunity and blessings of congregational prayer. I hope you enjoyed the clip earlier of Maulana Hazar Imam's first visit to Tajikistan. I was personally moved by the feeling of reunification, of coming together after a long period of absence, even if we didn't have to wait 1,000 years. This evening, we have the privilege of a reflection by Alwaez Karim Jiwani on the blessing of prayer, both congregational and personal. We will then hear from you. What are you most looking forward to as Jamaat Khana reopens? I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. We will then learn a little about the recent vaccine guidance in our recurrent segment, COVID Conversation, and we will end, as usual, with our musical expressions. Now, let us warmly welcome Alwaez Karim Jiwani. Alwaez Karim Jiwani works professionally with ITRIP Canada, overseeing conceptualization and delivery of programs targeted to the General Jamaat, post-sec and young adult segments, as well as training of institutional leadership. In addition to the various national responsibility, Karim has undertaken a variety of religious education programming, YZs, seminars, youth camps, educator training, and leadership orientations across the world. Karim has authored curriculum materials and articles for the IIS and has been a faculty member for their international training program. Karim has a Master's of Education's degree from the University of London and is a graduate of the Institute of Ismaili Studies. Please welcome Alwaez Jiwani.
یا علی مدد برادران و خواهران عزیزم، بسیار خوشحالم که امشب درباره فیض و برکت جماعتخانه با شما صحبت می کنم. اجازه دهید با اظهار مبارکی و شکرگزاری به خاطر بازگشایی جماعتخانه شروع کنم که این شرایط فراهم شد و دعا می کنم که بقیه جماعتخانه ها نیز به زودی بازگشایی شوند. آمین. برادران و خواهران عزیز، روز جمعه 13 مارچ 2020 یک رویداد بسیار مهم در تاریخ اخیر ما بود. روزی که در خاطره جمعی همه ما باقی خواهد ماند، زیرا در این روز همه گردهمایی های ما به شمول مراسم مذهبی ما به حالت تعلیق درآمد. با آنکه این رویداد شوک و اندوه آنی در پی داشت، اما به لطف مولا و سخت کوشی و خلاقیت بسیاری از والنتران، رهبران و آموزگاران جماعت ما توانستیم به زودی پروگرام‌های آنلاین را شروع کنیم و اولین برنامه مجازی خود را که گرامی داشت از نوروز بود به تاریخ 21 مارچ به جماعت کانادایی تقدیم نماییم. از آن زمان به بعد بسیار خوششانس بوده ایم که به بسیاری از برنامه‌های مجازی که توسط مؤسسات متعدد برای همه جماعت ساخته شده بود دسترسی داشته‌ایم. این برنامه‌ها ما را قادر می‌سازد تا ارتباطمان را حفظ کنیم، از همدیگر حمایت کنیم و بیاموزیم و ظرفیت سازی کنیم تا با استفاده از این برنامه‌ها بتوانیم به خوبی از دوران بیماری همگیر و بعد از آن عبور کنیم. در زمینه اجرای مناسک مذهبی، مریدان طاعات و عباداتشان را در کنار خانواده‌هایشان در خانه انجام دادند، زیرا در طریقه ما مانند بسیاری از مذاهب دیگر عبادات به صورت هم فردی و هم جمعی می باشد. این تفکر عبادت شخصی در خانه در طول تاریخ ما جماعت را قادر ساخته تا با دین و سنتشان پیوند داشته باشند و دنبال معنویت باشند و هویت متمایز خود را حفظ کنند، مانند اعضای جماعت آسیای مرکزی که در همین ویدیوی افتتاحیه مشاهده کردیم. با وجود این اصل و ماهیت عبادت شخصی در خانه و در کنار خانواده، هنگامی که جماعتخانه مسدود شد و یا دسترسی محدود گردید، دل بسیاری از ما برای حضور جمعی و گردهمایی‌های مذهبیمان در جماعتخانه تنگ شده است. این امر باعث یک حس کمبود و خلا در زندگی ما به وجود آورده است. به همین لحاظ برادران، خواهران، جای تعجب نیست که در چند روز گذشته با اعلام بازگشایی جماعتخانه در جاهای مختلف شاهد تغییر ملموس و محسوس در خلق و خوی بسیاری از اعضای جماعت بوده ایم. این امر به خصوص برای کسانی که تنها زندگی می کنند و سالمندانی که عمدتاً در خانه‌های خود محبوس ماندند و این همه تحمل کردند خیلی صدق می کند. بازگشایی جماعتخانه احساس شادی، آرامش، شکرگزاری، احساس خوشبینی و امید را به وجود آورده است. این احساسات و واکنش‌ها به بازگشایی جماعتخانه‌ها بیانگری اهمیت جماعتخانه است و نقشی که در زندگی ما ایفا می‌کند، در حالی که ما این فیض و برکت را احتمالاً همیشه در دسترس پنداشته بودیم. از نظر بسیاری جماعتخانه یک مکان حیاتی و پر اهمیت در زندگی آنهاست. همسو با روحیه اسلام که دین و دنیا را به هم می‌آمیزد، جماعتخانه کاربرد چندگانه دارد. جماعتخانه نیازهای معنوی، فکری، اجتماعی، فرهنگی و بسیاری دیگر از نیازهای ما را برآورده می‌سازد، طوری که مولانا حاضر امام در بسیاری از سخنرانی‌هایشان توصیف کردند. جماعتخانه محلی برای گردهمایی‌های مذهبی، نظم، صلح، آرامش، عبادت و دعا، امید و اطلاع انسانیت، برادری و روشندلی معنوی است. برای بعضی جماعتخانه پناهگاه روح انسان است. از نظر طریقت جماعتخانه برای برخی به عنوان مکان تجلی نور خدا تفسیر می شود. بر اساس تعبیر قرآن کریم در سوره نور آیه 36 چنین آمده است: نقل قول: این نور در خانه‌هایی است که خدا اذن داده شأن و منزلت و قدر و عظمت آنها رفعت یابند و نامش در آنها ذکر شود. همواره در آن خانه‌ها صبح و شام او را تسبیح می‌گویند. ختم نقل قول. بنابراین در این فضا است که نور همیشه وجود دارد و ما سعی می‌کنیم که پیوند شخصی و معنوی خود را با مرشدمان تقویت کنیم. برادران و خواهران، هنگامی که ما با سختی‌ها، دردها و رنج‌ها مواجه می‌شویم، به جماعتخانه می‌رویم و برای رفع سختی‌ها و تأمین صلح، آسایش و و برای غلبه بر مشکلات خود به آستان مشکل کشا دعا می کنیم. جماعتخانه همچنان مکانی است برای اجرای مراسم و هنگام رویدادهای مهم در چرخه حیات ما، مانند تولد، ازدواج و مرگ. در زمینه اهمیت اجتماعی جماعتخانه باید فراموش نکنیم که بهترین چای در جماعتخانه میسر است که همه ما برای آن دلتنگ شده ایم و انشالله در آینده نزدیک به آن میرسیم. برای برخی جماعتخانه مانند مرکز یا پایگاه و لنگرگاه زندگی است که باعث ثبات، راهیابی، امید و تأثیرگذاری بر همه ابعاد زندگی ما می شود و کیفیت زندگی ما را ارتقا می بخشد. جای تعجب ندارد که پیرصدگور نور جماعتخانه را با استفاده از استعاره زیر چنین توصیف کرده است: جماعتخانه مانند دریاچه‌ای است که در آن مرواریدهای گرانبها یافت می شود. اگر در عمق آن به غواصی بپردازیم، فیوزات و برکات بیشمار معنوی از آنجا به دست می آید. بنابراین جماعتخانه واقعا یک نعمت و یک برکت است، یک هدیه گرانبها است که توسط امام زمان به ما اعطا شده است. پس از موضوع اهمیت جماعتخانه و اینکه چرا و چگونه جماعتخانه جایگاه مهم در زندگی روزمره یک مرید دارد، اجازه دهید مختصراً به بررسی اهمیت گردهمایی مذهبی و عبادت در جماعتخانه بپردازیم. از زمان پیامبر گرامی اسلام و تأسیس اولین مسجد در مدینه و دستور عبادت دست جمعی، این امر بخشی اساسی دین و عبادت در میان مسلمانان بوده است، همان طوری که در بسیاری از سنت‌های مذهبی وجود دارد. بر علاوه دستور قرآن درباره عبادت‌های دست جمعی، احادیث نبوی نیز در فضیلت طاعات و عبادات جمعی وجود دارد که در آن ثواب عظیم نهفته است و مسلمانان را تشویق به این امر می‌کنند. مولانا حضرت‌امام پیوسته ما را به جماعتخانه رفتن توصیه کرده است و فرموده است که این عمل او را بسیار خرسند می‌کند. جامعه شناسان و روانشناسان نیز نظریات متعددی درباره تأثیر و نقش مشارکت جمعی ارائه دادند. گرد هم آمدن برای مشارکت آرمان‌ها، اصول، آیین‌ها، انگیزه‌ها و آرزوهای مشترک مانند تلاش برای پاکیزگی نفس، تحول روحی، آرامش و ارتقای روحانی در صورتی که با تمرکز و تداوم انجام شود، قوت، برکت و تأثیری بیشتر نسبت به عبادت فردی دارد. این موضوع را هنگام خواندن ذکر به صورت دستجمعی یا همخوانی گنان و قصیده تجربه کرده ایم. شاید این موارد فوق بتواند ما را در درک و معنی این حدیث بیشتر یاری کند که پیامبر فرموده است: فضیلت عبادت در جماعت 27 بار بیشتر از عبادت فردی است. علاوه بر این، مشارکت جماعت به اشتراک گذاشتن نمادها، اصول، آرمانها، اجرای آداب و رسوم یکسان، معانی یکسان مانند داشتن یک زبان مشترک است که باعث ایجاد احساس اتحاد، احساس تعلق اجتماعی و احساس هویت مشترک می شود. برادران و خواهران، 15 ماه گذشته تجربه‌ای بود که ما در طول زندگی خود مانند آن را ندیده بودیم که تأثیر آن در هر گوشه و کنار جهان و در همه جنبه‌های زندگی ما مشهود است. بیماری همگیر درس‌های زیادی را به ما آموخته است، از جمله درک واقعی از آسیب پذیری وجود جسمانی ما. درس‌هایی در مورد آنچه زودگذر است و می‌تواند در یک چشم به هم زدن از بین برود و فرق آن با آنچه ماندگار است و اهمیت جاودانه دارد. ما نقش دین و جامعه را برای ایجاد امید، آرامش، قوت و توانایی گذر از سختی‌ها درک کردیم. بیایید در راه دین و ایمان خود ثابت قدم باشیم. ایمانی که به ما کمک کرده است در 15 ماه گذشته بر مشکلات غلبه کنیم و همچنان مناسک مذهبی خود را چه در سطح شخصی و فردی و چه به صورت جمعی در جماعتخانه هایی که مولانا حاضر امام برای ما ارزانی داشته است انجام دهیم. بیایید به خواسته های امام عزیزمان پایبند بمانیم تا اعتقاد و ایمان راسخ داشته باشیم، نه اعتقاد تقلیدی، و از شرکت در جماعتخانه غافل نباشیم. با اجرای منظم مناسک مذهبی، حمایت متقابل، هدایت مداوم، لطف، مراقبت و با بودن دست حامل نور بر شانه های ما، همان طور که مولانا حاضر امام فرموده است، ما قوی‌تر و مقاومتر خواهیم شد، چنانچه تاریخ 1400 ساله ما شاهد آن بوده است. پیام مولانا حاضر امام به جماعت جهانی. نقل قول: امیدوارم جماعتم با شجاعت و امید به آینده نگاه کنند. رعایت سنت دیرینه وحدت، سخاوتمندی و حمایت متقابل است که همیشه به جماعت توانایی بخشیده است تا از نسل به نسل بعدی به سوی جایگاه بلندتری توانایی و مقاومت حرکت کند. فرزندان روحانیم باید توجه داشته باشند که این اصول مذهب ما است که در زمانهای سخت برای ما مایه آرامش و تسلی خاطر است. من همیشه با جماعتم هستم و هر یکی از شما، فرد شما، در قلب، در افکار و در دعاهای من هستید. 23 می 2020. برادران و خواهران عزیزم، تشکر از توجه شما. یا علی مدد.
Thank you, Alwaez, for those inspiring words. And now let's hear from some of you. We asked the questions: what are you looking forward to as Jamaat Khanas open? And what was your favorite programs as we were physically distanced? Let's hear some of your thoughts.
What I'm most excited about in relation to Jamaat Khana's reopening is getting back to that communal sense of happiness, that happiness of being together again. While praying at home with family has been a unique experience, getting back to Jamaat Khana together with other members of the Jamaat promises to be an exciting experience. And while we'll all be wearing masks, I look forward to looking each other in the eyes and seeing the smiles and happiness in our eyes.
Is when we all get to say prayers, dua, ginan together.
I think what I'm most looking forward to as Khane returns is being able to participate in that congregational prayer, and in particular get to hear some of those amazing ginans. Because as my family can unfortunately attest, my singing voice over here is not all that great.
And mine is trying cookies. I love the cookies too.
I miss being in a sacred space, a space where we can put all our worldly matters aside and find moments of stillness and peace. I miss the magic of congregational prayers, the beautiful recitations of ginans and farmans in familiar voices.
ਜਦੋਂ ਦਾ ਜਮਾਤ ਖਾਨਾ ਬੰਦ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ ਜਮਾਤ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਮਿਸ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਮਿਲਨੇ ਸਾਂ ਦਿਲ ਦਾ ਹਾਲ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਨੇ ਸਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਜਮਾਤ ਖਾਨੇ ਦੀ ਖਿਦਮਤ ਕਰਨੀ ਸਾਂ ਦਿਲ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਕੂਨ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਸੀ
I want to sing and Khane. Hooray!
We are eagerly waiting for the Jamaat Khana reopen and also looking forward for the in-class BUI as well. Teachers are doing excellent job engaging and helping students online, and the in-class return will make a huge improvement in students' religious education.
I am most looking forward to seeing friends and family and saying dua all together.
Every day that Jamaat Khanas were open, I could regularly find peace there. And when Jamaat Khanas were closed, I missed that.
As for me as senior, I'm very excited about the reopening of our Jamaat Khanas because it gives us all an opportunity to go for regular prayers, participate in the ceremonies, and it just makes you feel so charged up. Besides, It also gives us hope for better times to come with increased numbers and inshallah an end of the pandemic by the end of summer.
दुनिया डूबते वबा आई दिए जल्द जा ख़त्म हो जाए और असी दोबारा एक जमात होकर जमात खाने मिलिए आपस विच और एक दूसरे नाल हसी खुशी नाल मिलिए.
The programming that I've enjoyed the most since Jamaat Khanas have been closed is the Jeopardy game that was integrated into the Friday Night Reflections segment. It was really nice to see youth across the country work together to deliver programming for our Jamaat. It was also really nice to see the ISAs across the country coming together in a spirit of friendly competition and probably connecting even more so than they would have, before the pandemic.
I think my favorite programming over the past year while Khanas were closed was probably the Laylatul Qadr event. I found it super interesting to not only learn about the significance of some of the rites and passages, but also to learn about the history of the event and why we celebrate it.
A lot of programs were created when Jamaat Khana were closed last year, and one of my favorite and also other Jamaati members' favorite was the program of Laylatul Qadr. It was very well organized with beautiful recitation of Ginans, Qasidas and Tasbih and some excellent voices. Overall, it was very peaceful and enlightening experience.
I would say Friday Night Reflections I enjoyed, the Eid al-Fitr and the Laylatul Qadr.
One of my fondest memories of Jamaat Khana is when I became a volunteer. That has been a life-changing experience for me. In all my opportunities of volunteering, I have only learned and evolved to be a better person.
And our favorite program to watch when we were in lockdown was Friday Night Reflection on Fridays and also the Ismaili TV.
One mine is Laylatul Qadr and New Year's Eve.
I've enjoyed the ones organized by the CFTE with the musicals and some very informative and educational talks by very good speakers.
My fondest memory in my home Jamaat Khana when I was growing up was that feeling of belonging, where you could talk to anyone and connect with anyone when Khane ended. And that feeling of belonging was very special to me.
So nice to hear from you on what you were excited about. I agree. Friday Night Reflections has been great, but I've really enjoyed seeing our talented Ismaili artists through Ismaili sounds. This past week, there has been updates on vaccine doses. To help us understand these changes and how they can affect us, we return to our recurrent segment, COVID Conversations.
Ya Ali Madad. With the reopening of Jamaat Khanas this past week, we see a new hope on the horizon of a return to normal. To continue towards this goal, we should make sure that we continue practicing physical distancing, mask wearing, and keeping the circle of people that we physically interact with small. In the Canadian context, a full easing of the restrictions will only happen once the population is fully vaccinated. As Maulana Hazar Imam mentioned in his Talika on the occasion of Navroz, quote, "With the success in producing effective vaccines and other forms of treatment, human societies around the world are looking with a sense of hope and optimism to emerging from the current COVID-19 pandemic. At this time, I recommend that all my Murids should accept to be vaccinated in accordance with the directives of their respective health authorities as soon as the vaccines are offered, as indeed I have done already. It is also my wish that my Jamaat should avoid any complacency and that every Murid should continue exercising personal responsibility to ensure protection from the virus." End quote. With an established vaccine supply, it is important to get the second dose of your vaccine as soon as it's available to you. 2 doses of vaccine are required for complete protection. Current research shows us that once a person is fully vaccinated, that is, 2 to 3 weeks have passed since a person has received their second dose, the risk of severe illness, hospitalization, and death becomes extremely low. We are also aware that members of the Jamaat who have received AstraZeneca as their first dose are concerned about what to do next. There is recent evidence that shows receiving an mRNA vaccine, that is, a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, after receiving the AstraZeneca will boost the immune response, which is what we would expect from a second dose. As a result, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization has just updated its guidance about second doses. They recommend that individuals who have received AstraZeneca as their first dose may receive AstraZeneca, Pfizer, or Moderna vaccines for their second dose. Now, this is not a new concept. Similar vaccines from different manufacturers have been used in the context of changing vaccine supply and changing public health programs. So, for example, different vaccines have been used to complete a series of vaccination for illnesses such as influenza, hepatitis A, and some others. Also, remember the Pfizer vaccine, which was previously approved for all those 16 years and over, is now approved for children from 12 to 15 years of age. After thorough and independent scientific review of the evidence, Health Canada has determined that the vaccine is safe and effective at preventing COVID-19 when used in this age group. Now, we know that although fewer children get COVID-19 and get sick from COVID-19, we also know that children can be infected with the virus, they can get sick from it, and they can pass it on to others. So getting your child vaccinated will protect your child and will protect your family. As a result, vaccination is now recommended for all individuals 12 years of age and older. In the coming days to weeks, we will hear from provinces about their specific guidelines. For updated information, please visit II Canada COVID Corner. If you have any additional questions or concerns, please reach out to your healthcare provider. If you need assistance in finding a provider or have other questions about the vaccines, please contact the Access Line. Inshallah, with greater vaccine supply and a short period of additional vigilance, we can slowly emerge from this pandemic over the coming months. Ya Limadat.
We end this evening with 2 segments. With the spotlight on Jamaat Khanas today, we bring you an expert from an interview with Bruno Freschi, the famed architect of the Ismaili Center, Vancouver, or Darkhana as it is affectionately known. Bruno's affection for the building and his ongoing involvement in maintaining its pristine condition is obvious when he speaks. I hope you'll enjoy it.
What I've found, having done 1,000 tours, once people hear this, they go in, and then I catch them rubbing the wood, or they're trying to touch it, trying to find what all this means. Why isn't this legible? And I have to explain that ambiguity gives birth to curiosity, and curiosity gives birth to spirituality. In essence, this story starts with a funny beginning, because my secretary said, "There's somebody that's insisting that I speak with you. We would like you to consider doing a building for His Highness the Aga Khan. We want you to meet His Highness, and he, of course, has the final call Next thing I know, I was in Paris. And that was really quite an exciting meeting because His Highness has a profound understanding of architecture, and very, very few clients in the world are prepared to talk about spiritual space, the meaning of design, the process of design. And I discovered a soulmate in His Highness. As the first Jamaat Khana in North America, it carried the responsibility to become a symbol in and of itself. The Jamaat Khana did achieve that quality, but that was a stated first principle. The second was that as a landmark, it was to be iconic. And the point of talking about symbolism and iconic qualities is that it has to relate to generations yet to be born. But this building had to be a fusion of Ismaili historical character, Islamic historical character, and contemporary Canadian environment. So that leads us to the real conceptual phase, that in spiritual architecture, one goes in to go out. Really what it means is that who go into the building go there for spiritual purposes. The building must achieve a quality that you can leave behind. So you go in to literally and spiritually go out. That was a principle. So first, create beauty. Everything was about beauty, but to that idea enables one to enter the realm of spirituality. It frees you up. In that sense, you need the building to get that, but then you don't need the building anymore because you're free of the building. And that this narrative of the site begins as you turn off Curl Avenue and you come in, and there is this confusing point of entry. Do I go left or do I go right? Confusion gives birth to question. And that momentary perception, decision is your welcome to the site. And that happens throughout the building. The octagon, the magic of the octagon. If you put them together, they nest together and leave a square between them. This octagonal geometry infused throughout the building. Now the octagon simply is the midpoint between the circle and the square, and that holds the base of the dome together. But a circle, domes or circles, must come down to straight walls. And so the squaring of the circle has been part of the mystery of the development of the past 7,000 years of architecture, and Islamic architecture has accomplished that most eloquently. Earlier I talked about the principle of this indelible, symbolic, iconic presence of a building for a new community. And so I decided that all the materials would be of the earth. And to celebrate that gave birth to the concrete, it gave birth to the sandstone, and the various uses of glass in the building. We were able to celebrate materials which are very permanent. and we were able to clad the entire exterior and pave the octagonal pattern in the courtyard with sandstone is even more beautiful in the rain than when it's dry, than less beautiful. And it rains in Vancouver. In a spiritual building, one has to capture light, but more importantly, you have to celebrate light. So those large windows are really not windows at all, they're lanterns. So we put the glass out in the light, and so it glows inward and then gives contrast for the iconography which is on the glass. At the lower faces of that piece that protrudes out, it's sloped 45 degrees. And we fired the iconography on both sides of the glass. The aberration between the inside print and the outside print on an inch-thick glass vibrates visually. At nighttime, when the artificial lighting is on the interior, looking out, the light glows gold. This is really the celebration of light, celebrating something which is extremely important and permanent in our architectural environment, and that Islamic architecture historically has really consistently awakened us to the surface of buildings. When I was invited to Paris after the appointment, we had, I think it was 2 or 3 different sessions with His Highness, which were very personal, very direct. And he had just begun this large global project of building the Jamaat Khana. And he had completed the London Jamaat Khana. So we toured that. But what I discovered was that His Highness has an architectural gene. And he is, in fact, I call him an architect. He denies it, but anyway, I thought he was very, very, very receptive and very responsive to all the big ideas that we were trying to talk about. You can't talk about these with anybody. You gotta be there. And so those ideas were central to the whole conception of the building. And he was really a magnificent client in that sense. The most important dimensions, which I mentioned earlier, were the conversations we had around sacred space, something that's not understood by a lot of people, but what every religious building should try to achieve.
And now we end, as always, with some musical expression. Thank you for joining me this evening. Have a wonderful week. Ya Ali Madad.
हर सू है तेरा नजारा, तुझसे ही सांसों की धारा, ना तेरा कोई किनारा, हो मेरे मौला मेरे यारा।
हर सू है तेरा नजारा, तुझसे ही सांसों की धारा, तुझ पे ही तन मन वाला, ओ मेरे मौला मेरे यारा।
साए में तेरे हमें सदा रखना, साए में तेरे हमें सदा रखना, मांगते हैं हम दिल से ये दुआ। मौला ओ मेरे मौला, तेरे ही नूर से रोशन ये जहां। तेरी पनाह है मेरा जुनून, तेरे ही जिक्र से मिलता सुकून। रंग में तेरे रंग जाऊं, गीत खुशी के संग गाऊं, नूर का जाम पिला दे साकी, मस्त मलंग हो जाऊं।
रंग में तेरे रंग जाऊं, गीत खुशी के संग गाऊं, नूर का जाम पिला दे साकी, मस्त मलंग हो जाऊं।
साए में तेरे हमें सदा रखना, साए में तेरे हमें सदा रखना, मांगते हैं हम दिल से ये दुआ। मौला ओ मेरे मौला, तेरे ही नूर से रोशन ये जहां। सारे जहां का तू है कलंदर, नूर के कतरे हम, तू है समंदर। तेरी चाही मेरी चाहे, होगा बस जो तेरी चाहे, हाथ मेरा थाम ले तू, बस मेरी अब ये दुआ है।
तेरी चाही मेरी चाहे, होगा बस जो तेरी चाहे, हाथ मेरा थाम ले तू, बस मेरी अब ये दुआ है।
साए में तेरे हमें सदा रखना, साए में तेरे हमें सदा रखना, मांगते हैं हम दिल से ये दुआ। मौला ओ मेरे मौला, तेरे ही नूर से रोशन ये जहां। धरती अंबर नदियां और सागर, जर्रे जर्रे में आया तेरा निशान। हर सू है तेरा नजारा, तुझसे ही सांसों की धारा, ना तेरा कोई किनारा, हो मेरे मौला मेरे यारा।
हर सू है तेरा नजारा, तुझसे ही सांसों की धारा, तुझ पे ही तन मन वारा, ओ मेरे मौला मेरे यारा।
साए में तेरे हमें सदा रखना, साए में तेरे हमें सदा रखना, मांगते हैं हम दिल से ये दुआ। मौला ओ जहां, धरती अंबर नदियां और सागर, जर्रे जर्रे में आया तेरा निशान।